So Title IX is a one-sentence, simple federal law passed as sort of the crowning achievement of the feminist movement back in 1972 that simply prohibits any discrimination in publicly funded education programs on the basis of sex. It has never been interpreted by any Supreme Court to ever have included sexual orientation or gender.
Your kid is on a sports team, on a swimming league. You need to be asking, are you going to allow biological males to play with my daughter on this team? And then if they say yes, then you need to be filing complaints. We need to be letting people know. It's a very dangerous situation for many of these girls when it comes to sports.
Parents need to pay very close attention, ask lots of questions, and the people in Congress and at the state level need to exercise their spinal column and do the right thing to push back.
All right, folks, we've had a very busy political week. Donald Trump's been in court. Mike Johnson and the team up in New York fighting back against these protests that college students are doing to support Hamas and a pro-terrorist organization. Unbelievable. And then the Biden administration changed the definition of Title IX, which was a 1970s law that gave more opportunities to women. Most of us know it because of the opportunities through sports, but it's interesting because all the progressives that fought for these rights for women are nowhere to be found. They're fine as biological men take these opportunities from women. And it's the conservatives that are actually fighting for this. How much of an issue is this going to be in the campaign? What should we do to push back? I've got two amazing guests here today. Sarah Parshall Perry, she's here from the Heritage Foundation, and Tiffany Justice, the co-founder of Moms for Liberty. This is such an important issue. If you have a young daughter, if a granddaughter, a friend, anybody. I mean, this is changing the course of American society, and I think we need to figure out what we need to do about it. Before I get to Sarah and Tiffany, I want to tell you about two of the amazing sponsors that help keep this show free across all those platforms that we're watching it on: YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on any of these, it's free because of these amazing sponsors. Let's hear from them and then bring in Tiffany and Sarah. I don't mean to sound alarmist, but we know that at some point you're going to lose power, right? Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week, a month, who knows, right? It happens all the time. Natural disasters, poles go down, things happen in this world. Maybe the power grid gets struck. Be prepared. I know I am, and I'm asking you to think about it as well. If you go to forpatriots.com/Spicer, you can get the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. I have one in my house right now, and it's so cool because the great thing about this, I've had generators in the past, but the Patriot Power Generator 2000X runs on solar panels. They come free with it, right? The panels come free with it. So you don't have to worry about gas and fumes and noise. You can put it in your house. I tested it here in my house. I hooked up my computer, my phone, a toaster oven. You can even power your fridge with the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. That's the beautiful thing about it. You can bring it in your house. You don't have to worry about gas. It's portable. If someone else needs a hand, maybe a friend or a family member, you can do that as well. Go to forpatriots.com/Spicer and you will be ready in a time of emergency, and you will have all that you need, powering all those things, and the free solar panels come right with it. Go to forpatriots.com/Spicer now and make sure that you're ready in times of emergency. In these times of economic uncertainty, are you looking for a way to diversify? I know I was. And so I called my friends at Bishop Gold, 844-984-1616, or go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean and have a conversation with them about how to secure your financial future using precious metals. Now, I did that. Now, so you may be at home right now and say, I've got an old 401k, an IRA, or I'm just looking to expand my portfolio. I picked up the phone, I called them, and I explained to them my financial situation, what I was looking into, and they created a mix that would work for me. You should do the same. These are the people that I trust with my money. I invested my money with Bishop Gold Group because they're full of integrity and transparency. They can tell you exactly how the system works, how you can hold it, how they can hold it, how you liquidate it in times of need. So if you've got that old 401k, you've got that old IRA, or you're sitting back right now concerned about the future and thinking, I need to diversify, call Bishop Gold Group, 844-984-1616, or go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean to begin your financial journey with precious metals. And by the way, you get a free gift because you're coming through me. Ladies, thanks for joining us. Sarah, I want to start with you. For those who might not be real familiar with Title IX, can you just give us a little primer on it? Where did it come from? What was the impetus, et cetera?
Sure. So Title IX is a one sentence, simple federal law passed as sort of the crowning achievement of the feminist movement back in 1972 that simply prohibits any discrimination in publicly funded education programs on the basis of sex. And it has never been interpreted by any Supreme Court to ever have included sexual orientation or gender identity. But it was simply designed to level the playing field, both athletically and educationally, for girls and women who were shut out from things like higher education and graduate school programs to scholastic athletics. And it really was something from which I've not only benefited, but my daughter and my mother have both benefited as well. So in theory, it's a very simple federal law, but it's been under this administration significantly complicated.
Just so I'm clear, I think most people associate Title IX specifically with sports. Why is that? Or am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right. I think many people incorrectly believe it simply applies to sports and often within that context, only within the college atmosphere. But when in fact, it is any federally funded program from Head Start and kindergarten all the way through graduate schools. It applies to trade schools, vocational schools. If it is an educational program that accepts so much as $1 of federal funding, that anti-discrimination prohibition is required to be followed by all of those different educational associations and programs. But sports did not come later until 1978. But the original impetus was simply educational equality, classroom opportunity, graduate school opportunity, and an opportunity to better themselves. For example, we know that a good 94% of the female executives in the country now, as a result of Title IX's reauthorization, have the chance to play scholastic sports and do so at the kindergarten through 12 and the high school and college level. So it's really done wonderful things for women's advancement. We recognize exactly how important education is. And this was the platform that was guaranteed to women back in the 70s.
Tiffany, there's been a renewed interest in Title IX. When did that start to happen, as far as you can tell?
I think parents woke up during COVID and there were a lot of things they took for granted, like parental rights, fundamental parental rights, that the government understood their place in our lives as parents. And what we saw during COVID was, in fact, that wasn't true. And once again, we have a mountain of science and our own inherent knowledge as parents that girls and boys are different, that sex is binary. And yet we have the government coming down with its full force to obliterate parental rights in schools. And so moms are awake. They saw it happen once. They're not going to let it happen again. What we know is that Title IX will no longer protect our children in school. It will deprive them of educational opportunities, free speech rights, and at times put them in physical danger. So moms are very concerned.
Sarah, this, as you said, was in the 1970s. So when was the shift to sort of get in there and make it more about the transgender thing? Was this in the last 2 years, the last 4 years? This administration has it been creeping in for 10? It's weird. You suddenly hear about it now, but I assume that it kind of was occurring under the radar for a while.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of conservatives were decried as being alarmist and hysterical after Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015. But isn't it interesting that those of us who said, listen, the recognition of same-sex marriage and the evisceration of all state rights when they have in fact passed ballot referenda indicating their definitions under state law include one man, one woman marriage. When the Supreme Court took that away, many of us said this is a slippery slope and there are going to be other iterations that are going to completely blow apart what we have known to be natural law foundations, moral order, and biological reality. And isn't it interesting that in 2020, just a mere 5 years later, we saw from the Supreme Court the Bostock versus Clayton County decision. Now, that was related to employment discrimination and the failure, the refusal to allow discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. But something important to note is that sex was the underlying characteristic for that opinion. Many people forget that. Many progressives cut to the chase and say, well, sex is the same under this court case as gender orientation or gender identity and sexual orientation, when in fact the court did not hold that. But it has not prevented this administration from taking that decision and running with it. In fact, just a mere 6 months later, as his first executive act as president, Joe Biden issued an executive order telling all of his federal agencies to expand their prohibitions on sex discrimination based on Bostock to include sexual orientation and gender identity. That whole of government approach has really ramped everything up that we've seen in terms of dialogue, discourse, and debate on gender identity. It's fueled it with rocket propulsion, and it really has given us what we're seeing now are a significant level of federal court battles on everything from women's sports to, quote, gender affirming care to parents' rights when their child expresses gender dysphoria. This issue of gender identitarianism is really a multi-headed hydra.
So just to continue on the legal path real quick, am I wrong to assume that once the genie's out of the bottle, it's almost impossible to get it back in, meaning that once we go down this path of redefining what Title IX covers or how it's being covered or how the government interprets it, it might be hard to kind of go backwards? Or is there hope that we can stop this?
I think ultimately that's reliant on two different things. First, we need steel-spined legislators, both at the state level and at the federal level, to say, listen, you did not amend Title IX to include gender identity or sexual orientation. We are going to define for federal law or state law exactly what male and female or biological sex means under our pre-existing legal statutes. Now, at the additional sort of other arm of the approach here is federal litigation. And because of the proliferation on so many of these gender-related issues, from parents' rights to custody rights to school secrecy policies to gender-affirming medicine to women's sports, it is going to require a great deal of federal litigation. And ultimately, I think the Supreme Court is going to have to wrestle with the Bostock decision, with the Obergefell decision, if in fact they did open a Pandora's box, and clarify once and for all that you cannot read into longstanding federal law any interpretation that your administration wants.
Tiffany, when Sarah was describing how this all came into fruition, she talked about, and I don't want to put words in Sarah's mouth, but something to the effect of the crowning achievement of the progressive left, right? I think that's pretty much in the 70s when they fought for this. They wanted equality. They wanted women to get this. When you are talking to moms, do you find that this is a partisan issue, or that moms on the left say, I got a young daughter that I want to have the opportunities too?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so much bigger than sports. And you talked about that for a second. And I want to really go back down to parental rights. I want to help you to understand, and for your audience to understand, that we have a situation in American public schools right now where government schools are having private conversations with children about their sexual orientation or gender identity behind the backs of parents, which puts children down a path of social transition that we know goes to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. Sean, it's a perfect storm. In one moment, we are making incredible progress when it comes to the so-called idea of gender affirming care. There's nothing affirming about it. And you see countries in Europe that are changing course. We have the CAS review that just came out that showed gender affirming care is not what is best for kids. And America is far behind. So again, parents are stuck in a hurricane of the new information coming out about gender affirming care and the government going, all in and pushing this on kids. Title IX, these new regulations will obliterate parental rights at the state level. All of the hard work that we've done to create those protections.
So, Tiffany, when you say the government's gone all in, do you mean that literally elected officials or appointed officials are leading this charge, or are there other parents that are, maybe have a transgender kid or something? Or I guess the bottom line is what I'm asking is, who's pushing for this?
I'm going to say a couple things. First of all, there's no such thing as a transgender child. I know that's hard for people to hear, but these are children that are dealing with mental distress, and parents need to parent that mental distress just like they would any other issue that their child is dealing with. And so the idea there are transgender children that need protection, sexual orientation, gender identity does not need to be discussed in school. It has nothing to do with teaching kids reading, writing, and math. In our schools, we should be focusing on the 1, 2, 3s and the ABCs, not ideologies. But this will give the opportunity for the government to mandate gender identity curriculum in government schools. It's happening now in some places. In Washington State, in California, you see secret transition plans that are part of policy in school districts. You have kids being taught in kindergarten. They could be a boy, they could be a girl, or they could be neither, maybe a tree that day. And so parents have wanted to opt their children out. We've seen efforts in Montgomery County, Maryland, of parents to opt their children out of this instruction, but they are that is being refused to them. And this law could effectively say, no, this is mandated curriculum and your children must be taught this.
So Sarah, like I think about it in the context of sports, because that's what the media largely focuses on. To the point that Tiffany's making, what else should a parent think about the effects of any changes in Title IX? What else could they be affecting in terms of curriculum, et cetera?
Oh, sure. So there's a significant amount of sort of tendril snaking that's happening right now with Title IX, because not only does it address sexual orientation and gender identity, it also addresses the pregnancy or related characteristics, including termination of pregnancy, which sets
wait, hold on.
groundwork.
What is it? You just lost me for a second. It has to do with pregnancy and termination of pregnancy?
Yes. In addition to sexual orientation and gender identity, it includes pregnancy, related conditions, and including termination of pregnancy.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
That's abortion.
I literally thought that this was a rule that said you got to have an equal playing field for men and women.
Right.
So what does this have to do? I don't get. Explain what that means, though.
Absolutely nothing. But it sure does strengthen the possibility that now your minor child will be counseled into abortion at a publicly funded school or at a publicly funded university. And in fact, this is, I believe, another end run by this administration, for whom abortion is one of their sacred cows, to expand abortion access in light of the Dobbs decision. So we're also going to see the very unconstitutional use of preferred pronouns and speech codes.
But just stop. Explain this to me. I mean, I see Tiffany, agreeing with you vehemently. I don't understand. How does Title IX, you said it's one sentence, it has to do with an equal, how does this get us to what you're saying?
Sean, that's the $64,000 question. And I would love to sit down with Miguel Cardona and ask him that exact same thing.
So they're just using this as the vehicle, is what you're saying, that there's really...
Absolutely.
Okay, I feel like this is very Washington, which is all we need is a car, and we're using it for, it's like an omnibus bill. We're going to throw everything at this one thing and say it means everything.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
But it makes sense, because this is we're talking about truth. We're talking about biology. We're talking about the binary of sex, such basic fundamentals of who we are as individuals. And so you're right. This is a Trojan horse for changing the culture in our schools. And Sean, as a parent and as someone who represents so many parents across the country, we are incredibly concerned about the government overreach here.
But the thing that I find funny is Moms for Liberty is considered a conservative leaning group. The Heritage Foundation, again, I don't want to get crossways with your tax status, but it's a right-leaning conservative organization.
Sure.
And yet when you describe this, in the 1970s, it was founded as a crowning achievement of progressives and liberals. Where are the liberals, Sarah? Like, where are they out there saying Gloria Steinem and saying, you know what, I fought hard for women, and now a bunch of dudes are, where are the women?
Well, that's exactly it. That's why we find it so ironic that the Betty Friedan's and Gloria Steinem's and Bella Abzug's of our age are suddenly incredibly quiet about this, with a few notable exceptions. For example, the Women's Liberation Front has stood out. They have actually come out and said, listen, we don't agree with this reading of Title IX. But for the most part, it is moderates and conservatives who've gone up and said, this is absolutely a patent expansion, a legal expansion of longstanding federal law, and you're changing everything. The equality that our girls needed and required for so long under Title IX has now been eviscerated under this reading.
So, Tiffany, let me get back to the question I asked you a little while ago. When you talk to parents, is it a partisan and ideological issue, or do they say, I don't agree with you on anything else, Tiffany. But on this, I want my daughter to have opportunity.
Sean, you're right. Absolutely. There are people that don't agree with me on many different things that would agree on this issue. But overall in America, we're seeing over 70% of polling of parents that do not want gender ideology instruction in schools, do not want sexual orientation instruction. They want to be a part of their children's lives in every major decision that's being made. They do not want schools keeping secrets from them in case if a parent in this situation, if a parent is considered religious, for example, if the school doesn't think that they're going to affirm their child's wish to change their gender, they can actually report that parent as being a potential harm to the child. It's very concerning. So we're actually sending a letter out today to the National Governors Association, to attorney generals across the United States, telling them to stand with school districts against this. You've seen Cade Brumley in Louisiana, Ellen Weaver in South Carolina, state superintendents that are saying to their school districts, hold up, wait a second, we haven't agreed to this, and we are not looking for you to change any type of practices in your schools.
Sarah, let me ask you this. Where is the legal line between a guy walking into a female's changing room or bathroom and someone walking in and saying, I just identify with women? Is that, because
Right.
if you walk in most places and you're a pervert and you'll get arrested, but is it, you just have to identify yourself? Like, I raise my hand coming in, I identify, or I need to dress this way. But where is that line now legally?
Well, legally, if a state has an anti-discrimination provision, or a city has an anti-discrimination provision, or a corporation has a non-discrimination policy that expands sex to include gender identity, it doesn't matter how you're dressed, whether you've taken hormones, if you're young, old, doesn't matter the age. You can walk into any restroom that you want under public accommodations law as a biological male. This is why we're seeing increases in incidents of sexual assault. We're seeing men now in women's prisons engaging in sexual assault, men who are in women's domestic violence shelters who are engaging in assault. The numbers are rising for the very good reason that women ought to have privacy in protected spaces like bathrooms or dorm rooms or prison cells or domestic violence shelters. And this is truly sort of the cherry on top, giving the gender identitarianisms the upper hand in terms of equality in American education has just set women back 50 years. And the manifestations aren't just sports. They're not just scholarships. They're not just single sex admissions. It is our bodily privacy in bathrooms and locker rooms that is also now up for grabs.
Would you say that this is a slippery slope, meaning that if the Biden administration continues to expand it, that this could really reshape everything going forward on a
100%.
lot of, yeah.
100%. The Supreme Court's always used a bright line of something called immutability, those characteristics we have by accident of birth. They said that in Frontiero versus Richardson. Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote it in the U.S. versus Virginia case. We know that certain individuals need protection because they can't do anything about how they are born. Never before have we given civil rights protection to an individual based on their subjective self-identity, which is not only malleable, it is transient, as we now know the science indicates. That would throw the entire canon of civil rights law on its head, and it flies in the face of the Supreme Court's constitutional jurisprudence.
So what prevents me legally from identifying as another race ethnically? Or, again, where does this stop? Why can't I be a female Black woman?
That is exactly where it's headed, Sean. And that's not an overstatement. Rachel Dolezal, who represented herself to be half African-American and rose through the ranks of the NCAA, that was scandal at the time. It is not scandal anymore. Look what we're doing with biological men and biological women. I think it is simply a matter of time before now we start identifying as really anything that we want. In fact, the first surgery in Canada was just performed for something called body identity dysmorphia. An individual just had two healthy, normal fingers amputated because this individual identified as being someone who was handicapped. That is where we are going. There is no self-limiting principle here.
Tiffany, you're out talking to voters and to groups. How does this issue resonate as far as stuff that people feel like they want candidates to address? Where does that rank?
This is a big issue. Biological reality is a big issue for candidates. It's a winning issue. The majority of Americans do not believe that gender affirming care is what's best for kids. They're watching the research and the information that parents are seeing. The fact that we need to watch and wait when it comes to any child showing any type of gender confusion. And so for candidates, this is definitely an issue to weigh in on. Take a stand. Voters are watching. They want you to take a stand. They want to hear from you that you're going to protect our girls and that you're going to protect fundamental parental rights in our schools.
Sarah, if I'm a parent and I have a daughter in a school and I feel like this policy, whether it's sports or not, is affecting, what like legal recourse do I have?
Well, I encourage everyone to file Title IX complaints, whether you are a biological male or a biological female, when you are experiencing discrimination. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a parent. It doesn't have to be the student themselves. It could be someone with knowledge of the situation. And here's why. Under federal law, the executive agencies are duty bound to review every complaint and make a determination about every complaint that comes in the front door. They have 180 days to make a determination. So at the grassroots level, parents need to be getting very angry, documenting exactly what's happening to their own students, to the girls in their own schools or colleges, submitting those complaints to the Department of Education, and then finding out exactly who is suing against the rule and where your daughter or your granddaughter might be a suitable plaintiff, because ultimately this is where it's going to end up, is in court.
Is it all able to be done by executive order, or does Congress have the ability to go in and define the meaning, redefine the meaning in Title IX, meaning that they can clarify that this is not gender affirming or sexual?
Sure.
Is that what we need to see?
That is absolutely an option. Congress at any time can amend Title IX to provide clarifying language on what the meaning of sex is. We never thought we would need something like that, but that's a entirely viable possibility. But right now, Congress has 60 legislative days to mount what's called a Congressional Review Act challenge. That means 2/3 of either chamber has to downvote the rule. And then that resolution goes to the desk of President Biden, who of course will veto it. But at the very least, it will toll the statute of limitations. It will make sure that everything goes to pause until August 1st, when the administration has said that is when this will take effect. And the next president should immediately come into office, issue the exact same executive order that President Biden is, clarifying that for all federal law, sex means sex and not sexual orientation or gender identity. And then the next Department of Education has a long hill to climb. They will have to make a new rule, rescinding the other and offering brand new guidance.
Tiffany, are there any champions legislatively that will take on something like this?
I think that we do have many different champions that are taking this issue on. As I talked about, you have, leaders at the state level as far as education leaders, but then you have governors around the country that have been very clear. Ron DeSantis, Kim Reynolds, Sarah Sanders. You have governors that have been very clear that they are clear on what a woman is, and that sex is binary, biological, men and women. That's the truth. And that this idea of gender identity and sexual orientation becoming protected classes is not something that they support. And so, yeah, I think you're going to see, and what we hope to see from the Governors Association is them standing by school districts as they weather these changes and stepping up and having the backs of parents to say, we aren't going to keep secrets from you in our government schools. We're going to ensure that you're a part of every major decision that's happening in your child's life.
Do you want $250 free right now? $250. I got your attention, didn't I? If you're a business owner that has, 5 or more employees, or maybe you're not the owner, but you're the one who makes big financial decisions, that's your job, you're running the finance part of this or the expenses part, then listen up. I will put $250 in your pocket right now. No strings attached. You just have to go check out and talk to my friends at Ramp, right? Go to ramp.com/Spicer. You will want to find out what they're doing, because if you're the guy or the woman that controls the financing at the company, or you're the owner, Ramp is going to make your expense process unbelievably easier. They issue credit cards that you can give to each one of your employees. You can control all of the expenses. It streamlines so much. I had a guest on the show a couple months ago, and they called me afterward and said, I saw you talking about Ramp. We switched over to Ramp, and you wouldn't believe how much time it saves us. Helps us streamline things. We can put controls in place for our employees, how much they can spend. The reports are fantastic. If you are that business owner or the person in charge of the financing, go to ramp.com/Spicer, get the $250, but more importantly, make your life a lot easier, because Ramp is going to allow you to get those credit cards, the expense cards for each of your employees, and streamline so much of your expense and accounting systems that it'll make your life so much easier. Ramp.com/Spicer. Sarah, let me get back to the legal piece of like, if I'm a parent, how much of this should I be asking about? Because it seems like from the discussion that basically a lot of this is happening below the radar, where parents aren't necessarily having it come to their attention. It's almost coming through a back door sometimes. Is that fair?
Well, because not a lot of people pay attention to administrative or regulatory law, I don't think a lot of the American public recognizes exactly how catastrophic this Title IX rule change is. They're going to need to go to their local school principal and say, what are you doing about bathrooms? What are you doing about sports teams? What are the options to protect my daughter's privacy? And then they really need to think long and hard about whether or not public school, publicly funded education programs are providing exactly what they've guaranteed for 50 years, which is sex equality. I predict a rise in charter school and private school and parochial school enrollment, in addition to homeschooling, because there will come a point at which the damaging effects of this rule are felt in real time at the grassroots level. That will come right at the beginning of the school year, unless the federal litigators are successful in securing a preliminary injunction. And that's what we're hoping for.
Tiffany, I know you guys tweeted out, the superintendent of schools, I think she is, in Louisiana, put out a statement letting parents know what's going on. Explain how they're framing it.
Yeah, Kate Brumley said that this is these rules are not being recognized in Louisiana, that they go into effect in August, but that they do not have an intention in following them, and that he'll be following up with more information. And so what he's saying to the teachers is, hold, please. Do not make these changes. I think it's hard in America right now, though. As I said, you have Washington, California, other states like Maryland saying this is going to be taught to your child. You have absolutely no choice. We have courts that have said that parents don't have the right to opt their children out of this type of curriculum. That's happened already. So now we're going to have a federal law that says that backs up those courts in those false decisions from before, improper decisions. But yeah, I mean, parents, as Sarah said, need to be asking these questions. If your kid is on a sports team, on a swimming league, you need to be asking, are you going to allow biological males to play with my daughter on this team? And then if they say yes, then you need to be filing complaints. We need to be letting people know it's a very dangerous situation for many of these girls when it comes to sports. And parents, again, as I said, are concerned about their children's safety.
Sarah, I know you've got to jump. Any final thoughts? So I'll continue the conversation with Tiffany, but I know your schedule is tight today. Any final thoughts before you head out that you want people to know?
Well, I think everyone needs to know that, again, the word that I keep using is catastrophic. It completely eviscerates the purpose, the mission, the history, the guarantees of Title IX. It is the only federal civil rights law simply guided by a prohibition on sex discrimination. It is truly for women and girls, our sort of crown jewel. It is guaranteed equality in education for 52 years. There's nothing supported in any of the history, any of the congressional record, or even at the Supreme Court that indicates gender identity is inclusive under Title IX's prohibitions. Parents need to pay very close attention, ask lots of questions, and the people in Congress and at the state level need to exercise their spinal column and do the right thing to push back.
All right, Sarah, thank you for being with us. Tiffany, I'm going to continue the conversation with you. Tiffany, here's the thing that I don't get. We talk about how this is, you think this is a bigger issue in the election. What needs to be done? Because I think this is a clear contrast between Republicans and Democrats. What more can be done to put a spotlight on this issue?
This is not a partisan issue. And again, when we've
you
gone
don't
out,
think so?
No,
but here's what I was asking you this earlier, though. If it's not a partisan issue, why don't I ever see or hear about any folks on the left pushing back on this then?
I think you're going to. Honestly, when we've seen people move on this issue in general. We've seen legislators like Marsha Maynor in Georgia, or Tricia Cotham in North Carolina. Unfortunately, you're right. Republicans are generally protecting parental rights, and Democrats are not. They're not speaking up about it. But when we've seen Democrats flip to Republican, what we've seen them flip on are parental rights, education, freedom. And this issue, I think, is going to move people. I don't know, and Sarah's correct. The American people are not as informed as they need to be about these types of changes that are really changing the culture of our country. And the schools are being used to do that. It's very important for people to understand. And so we do need the legislators to step up. And I'm telling you, Sean, I really think you're going to see a lot more Democrats that are waking up on the issues of parental rights, on education freedom, and on this Title I issue of protecting our girls in schools, in their private areas, and protecting parental rights.
I hope you're right. I know President Trump has brought it up as an issue, even this week in a couple interviews that he had. I had Chris Stigall on earlier in the week, and Monday morning, President Trump called into his radio show, and he brought it up tangentially. But since the top of the ticket is going to be driving a lot of the activity, if you were advising President Trump or his team, would you suggest that they push this even further?
Yes, I think President Trump has the chance to be the common sense president who says he knows exactly what a woman is. And so, and I expect nothing less from him, to be honest with you. Americans are hungry for truth, and they want a president that's going to hear them and hear their concerns and stand for truth. President Trump will do that, I believe. He's been very clear about this issue. When he spoke at our national summit we had in Philadelphia, he was very clear about the fact that he thinks gender ideology has no place in American public schools. And we're very, very thankful for that.
That all being said, Sarah mentioned the Congressional Review Act. And I get President Biden's been very clear on this, but I think getting everyone on the record would be important. Is there anyone in the congressional ranks that is willing to champion this to get that Congressional Review Act moving?
That's very interesting. And we'd love to hear from them if they are. We've seen the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Jim Jordan has been very clear on this issue when I've spoken with him. Marjorie Taylor Greene has really worked to protect female sports and women's rights. And so I think you will see some champions of this issue. It's going to be up to us, the grassroots, the people on the ground, to make sure that our legislators understand that we want them to take action. And I think that's what's been missing in the busiest time of our lives as Americans, as moms raising our kids and, saving for college and building a business. We weren't as engaged as we should have been when it came to policy and legislation. And during COVID, we saw the fact that we weren't engaged, and the people that were making policies were so disconnected from what the people wanted. And so the onus is really on us now to have our voices heard.
To me, this whole thing is so warped because women fought hard to get these opportunities, scholarships, academically, and then obviously sports-wise. And then we have men going into these events, taking scholarships, playing on, getting records, and yet it blows my mind that not enough. Riley Gaines is like the only name that you can mention of somebody of prominence that's pushing back in the sports world, and I keep wondering where's that tipping point where somebody takes. Maybe it's that they have to infiltrate the WNBA and suddenly Caitlin Clark, doesn't win the big championship or something or become the star that she is. I mean, what is it going to take for women to go, wow, I lost out on that record. I didn't get that scholarship that I'd always thought that I could get because I had this opportunity under Title IX.
Of course, I think it's going to take girls not competing in certain events. Honestly, I know that it's horrible. And if you're a parent and you've got kids that are participating in athletics, it's a hard thing to hear because your kids have trained and they deserve the opportunity to compete. But it seems like the only way out is through. And we're going to have to take a stand as women and say, no, we are not going to compete against men in our sports events. And if you're going to compete as a man and try to pass as a woman, we're not going to compete against you. And so I know that's going to be hard, but I think we're going to have to do some hard things in order to be able to find our way through this madness. It is madness. I can't believe we're even having this conversation. Honestly, it's shocking.
I'm with you. Like what I think shocks me more than anything is that there's so many issues. I always talk about outrage with the media, and then I go, well, maybe I shouldn't be that outraged because of who they really are. In this particular issue, I can't believe that an issue that was championed and led by feminists and progressives back in the 70s, and then continued for decades as a great achievement that they wanted to herald, was hijacked by men. The irony is not lost on so many people, where it's like you realize you did something because men monopolized the funding and the opportunities, and now men are taking it back from women and you're defending them. That's the thing. When given the chance, I think during the women's NCAA championship, I think it was the LSU or the USC coach was asked, and she defended the process. And so many of these women who have benefited from this are now basically saying, well, it's not our call. And I'm like, are you kidding? You wouldn't be here without that.
This is a symptom of woke. It's weaponized compassion, weaponized empathy. This Title IX rule, if you look it up, if you Google it right now, it'll say protections for LGBTQ students. So it's wrapped in a lie. The good thing about this, however, is that, I'm friends with Jamie Michelle of Gays Against Groomers, and we have great partnerships around the United States. You see many gay people stepping up and saying, oh, no, don't you dare do this, using the umbrella or using the shield of protecting gay people or protecting kids who may be gay. Don't you use that in order to try to obliterate women, to obliterate our Constitution. So people are stepping up and speaking out. The name of the game here is awareness. Right to your legislators. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I think you're right. That's the question. How do we fix it? And letting people know that we're keeping their eye on them, and that at all levels, because it's school board on up on this one. If you had to look into your crystal ball, do you think the pendulum swings back?
I don't think the pendulum swings back. I don't think it works like that. I apologize for people, but I think the dialectic moves. The pendulum doesn't go back and forth. It kind of goes forward and back and forth. And so I think that we have a lot of work to do in order to protect a lot of the rights and freedoms that we've taken for granted for so incredibly long in this country. And so it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get our footing again.
But like, play this out with me for a second. Sure. So women who have scholarships, and just play this out in the sports world, because my mind is easier to work that way. They all these opportunities get taken by men, right? In all these different sports, swimming, you name it, basketball. Men come in, start dominating. In your mind, you don't think that there's a pendulum that swings back and says, this has gone too far because now a team of 5 in basketball is all men? Or do you think that's what I'm trying to figure out, how, because I would be blown away at some point. Then where are the opportunities for women, or are they just gone? I mean, if a team becomes all men identifying as women, and there are no biological women on a team or in a heat, if it's track or in swimming, you don't think that at some point we have to create another division just for biological women?
If you look at the Middle East, you get in a lot of trouble in those countries if you're gay. But if you are trans, you can play on the sports teams. And they actually have a lot of sports teams, soccer teams, where the majority of the female team is actually men. You can do a little search on that, too. I brought that up to Al Jazeera when they were doing an interview with me recently. So, yes, will the pendulum swing back? I hope you're right. I hope that girls aren't going to get hurt trying to compete against boys. And I hope that we are able to safeguard our girls' sports. But taken to the end of this rule, taken to its full completion, you could essentially have an entire team of men playing. Now, will the American public be okay with that? Sean, you're laughing, but here's the thing.
The idea that I feel like 10 years ago, this would have been a Saturday Night Live skit.
I know, we're cutting off the healthy body parts of children. We are stopping in America. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends what they call gender-affirming care, where they say puberty blockers, stopping the natural development of children. That doesn't just affect their puberty or their secondary sex characteristics. That's their brain development. That's their physical and body development, their bone development. And then we're saying cross-sex hormones and gender reassignment surgeries for minors. So where we are right now, when a Supreme Court justice can't answer what a woman is, and we have a president who unfortunately is not leading us well, is a very concerning time in America. And parents need to take the wheel.
You said something earlier that I think resonates so well, which is, on the right, there's so many times when we mock something. We go, that is the silliest thing I've ever heard. And I remember, 20 years ago when there was a whole discussion of gay marriage, and we started to say, well, what's next? And I do wonder, like, what is next? Because we keep losing these fights. and we say there's no way that could possibly happen. And then it happens. And as we were talking about, the pendulum swings and then gets stuck, because it's not going to go backwards. But we're not going to take any of these issues back. The barn door is closed.
Yes, I agree with you on some of that. I think that again, common sense reigns. Once you explain to people what this rule is doing and what it's really going to mean for their children, I believe in the American people. I believe in the fact that they'll understand how concerning this is, and we can work to have our voices heard. And I don't think our legislators hear from us enough. Yeah.
I hope you're right. It scares me because every time I think we've gone too far, we go another step and you go, okay, what else?
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you look at queer theory in the classroom, the drag queens, right, in the kindergarten classroom, why? Why did they want to do that? And that is queer theory entering our school. So you ask, where does this go from here? Queer theory is rooted in pedophilia. Foucault, Gail Rubin, Judith Butler, they speak very openly about that. And I know that's very hard for people to hear, and it's taking it to that next level. But you ask where it's going to go. They've clearly told us where it's going to go. You can look at the pride flag and see how many different iterations there are as this movement changes. A good friend of mine, James Lindsay, says the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution, because they're communists. And so today I saw a drag queen saying "Free Palestine," and I feel like it's just a combination. That in itself would take a whole other episode.
Tiffany Justice, Moms for Liberty, thank you for joining us and breaking down this what shouldn't be a complicated issue, but apparently is. For everyone out there, have a great weekend. Thanks for being with us. Please take some time this weekend to share this episode, share the show with people. I'm honored by all the times that you guys have done that already and the growth that we've had. So YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, please continue to share. We'll see you back here Monday on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.